The icy November wind clawed at my face, a malevolent hand stripping away any warmth the meager train ride from London had provided. Auburn, Maine, in the throes of its early winter bite, was far colder than I'd anticipated. It was barely dusk, the sky in bruised purple yielding to the inky blackness of a coming night. Lost, tired, and with a gnawing fear twisting in my gut, I tugged my worn coat tighter, the thin wool offering little protection. Billy Weaver, just turned 17, green behind the ears and burdened with the weight of a grown man's responsibility. My father, bless his overworked soul, had snagged a rare opportunity to sell a printing press to a reclusive writer holed up somewhere in this remote corner of the state. Being the only responsible one amongst my siblings, a debatable point, I assure you, the task fell upon my shoulders. The train station, a squat brick building more akin to a forgotten shed, offered no help. The sole attendant, a gruff man with a perpetually runny nose, pointed me vaguely in the direction of a supposed bed and breakfast a few streets down. Hope flickered, a fragile flame against the encroaching despair. The establishment, nestled amidst a row of similarly weathered houses, had a faded charm. A crooked sign boasting peeling gold lettering that barely held on proclaimed it to be the Peony Perch. A single bare bulb cast a sickly yellow glow on the dusty window panes. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the creaky door. A wave of warmth, almost suffocating in its intensity, washed over me. Before my eyes could adjust to the sudden dimness, a voice, surprisingly youthful for its owner, greeted me. "Lost, dear. Come in, out of the cold." A woman, her face obscured by the shadows, stood behind the counter. As she stepped closer, the light from a hanging oil lamp revealed a kind face, etched with the fine lines of a life well lived. Her smile, warm and genuine, calmed the thrumming anxiety in my chest. I'm looking for a room for the night," I stammered, feeling the weight of my 17 years pressing down on me. "Billy Weaver, is it? Such a handsome young man. We don't get many like you out here in the sticks." Her eyes, a surprising blue in the dim light, held mine with a curious intensity. I shifted uncomfortably, suddenly self-conscious under her scrutiny. "Yes, that's me," I mumbled, shoving my hands deeper into my pockets. "Well, Billy Weaver, you've come to the right place. We have a lovely room just waiting for a bright young man like yourself. And the price is very reasonable, I can assure you." The room, located on the second floor, was small but impeccably clean. A worn but sturdy bed stood in the center, covered in a crisp white quilt. A single window offered a view of the deserted street below. A faint scent of lavender hung in the air, calming and strangely comforting. Descending the stairs, I found the landlady, whom she introduced herself as Mrs. Pendragon, bustling about a cozy common room. A worn armchair sat beside a crackling fireplace, where a dachshund, sleek and black, lay curled up in a tight ball. It lifted its head for a moment, its dark eyes fixating on me with an unsettling intensity before returning to its slumber. "Would you care for some tea, Billy?" Mrs. Pendragon asked, her voice chirping with a nervous energy that contrasted with her earlier warmth. "It'll warm you right up." The tea, served in delicate china cups, was strong and scalding hot. Despite the burn on my tongue, I gulped it down, desperate to chase away the chill that had settled deep within my bones. The common room was decorated in a curious fashion. Faded photographs adorned the walls, each depicting a young man, impossibly handsome, with a bright, toothy grin. My gaze drifted to a dusty guest book on the side table. Only 2 names were inscribed, both with the same elegant flourish. Gregory Thorne, October 12, 1919. Peter Jennings, August 14, 1922. A shiver ran down my spine. The dates were far apart, yet the handwriting remained identical. "Lovely bunch, aren't they?" Mrs. Pendragon's voice broke the silence, startling me. I followed her gaze to the photographs. "Guests from years gone by. Such fine young men, wouldn't you say?" I nodded, unable to tear my eyes from the unsettling smiles. I finished, my voice hoarse. The similarity of the grins in the photos, impossibly wide and unnaturally white, had begun to gnaw at my sanity. Mrs. Pendragon giggled, a sound like wind chimes dancing in a graveyard. Oh yes, their smiles were their best feature. Strong, healthy teeth, like yours, Billy. I instinctively reached up, feeling my own teeth with a sudden surge of unease. Why the fixation on teeth? My gaze darted back to the dachshund, its black eyes gleaming in the firelight. It felt like it was watching me intently, almost appraisingly. They were all so eager to succeed, just like you, Mrs. Pendragon continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But the world can be a harsh place for young men, wouldn't you agree? Unease tightened its icy grip around my heart. Her words seemed to hold a hidden meaning, a dark undercurrent that sent shivers down my spine. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask her what she meant, but the question died on my lips. Suddenly, a loud banging sound echoed from the back of the house. It sounded like someone was hammering on a door. Mrs. Pendragon visibly stiffened. "Oh dear," she muttered, her smile faltering for the first time. "That must be Mr. Tibbles. He gets a bit excited sometimes." Before I could question her, she scurried towards the back, a tremor in her hands. I hesitated, a wave of dread washing over me. The hammering grew louder, accompanied by muffled shouts. My mind conjured terrifying images of what might be behind that door. Taking a deep breath, I rose from the armchair and crept towards the hallway. Curiosity, a morbid fascination, warred with the growing fear within me. I inched closer to the source of the noise, the banging now accompanied by frantic scratching. Peeking around the corner, I froze. A small, reinforced door stood at the end of the hallway. The frantic scratching was coming from within. Through a small, dusty window set into the door, I caught a glimpse of what looked like a claw. A long, sharp claw, digging desperately at the wood. My blood ran cold. This was no ordinary pet. A primal scream rose in my throat, but I choked it back. My mind raced, desperately searching for an escape plan. But before I could even form a thought, the door splintered with a deafening crack. A creature, unlike anything I had ever seen, emerged from the darkness. It was vaguely canine in shape, but grotesquely distorted. Its fur was matted and filthy, hiding most of its body. Its eyes, two glowing red orbs, zeroed in on me with a predatory hunger. My scream, this time, ripped through the air. I turned and bolted, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I could hear the creature's heavy thumps close behind me, its inhuman growls echoing in the narrow hallway. I reached the top of the stairs, my legs burning, and flung myself at the door. It wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at me as I rattled the handle, desperate to find it unlocked. Through the distorted glass, I could see the creature rounding the corner at the bottom of the stairs, its eyes fixated on me. Then a faint click. The door swung open a crack. Before I could react, Mrs. Pendragon, her face pale and drawn, shoved a small, heavy object into my hand. "Run, Billy," she rasped, her voice tight with fear. "Don't look back. Just run." Tears blurring my vision, I clung to the object, my fingers recognizing the smooth, cold surface of a key. I squeezed past Mrs. Pendragon and sprinted down the stairs, the creature hot on my heels. I burst through the front door and into the cold night air. Without a second glance, I slammed the door shut and shoved the key into the lock. I ran blindly, the creature's enraged growls fading behind me. I didn't stop until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give way. Finally, gasping for breath, I collapsed against a tree in a deserted park. As my heart rate slowed, I pulled the object Mrs. Pendragon had given me from my pocket. It was a small, silver whistle. Relief washed over me. A whistle, an obvious deterrent, a means of escape. But why? Then a horrific thought struck me. Why hadn't the creature attacked Mrs. Pendragon? Why had it been locked away in the first place? And most importantly, what did it want with young men with strong, healthy teeth? The chilling truth settled in my stomach like a lump of lead. Mrs. Pendragon was not a kind old lady running a B&B. As the realization dawned on me, a fresh wave of terror surged through me. The photographs on the wall, the identical dates in the guest book years apart, the fixation on teeth, it all clicked into place. Gregory Thorne and Peter Jennings weren't just guests. They were victims. The whistle in my hand seemed pitifully inadequate, but it was all I had. With a shaky breath, I blew into it, the shrill sound piercing the night. The silence that followed was deafening. Then a faint whining sound growing louder, accompanied by the unmistakable patter of paws. The dachshund, Mrs. Pendragon's supposed pet, emerged from the shadows, its tail wagging hesitantly. Unlike the monstrous beast I'd encountered moments ago, this creature seemed harmless, almost apologetic. Was this somehow connected? Was the dachshund a control mechanism? A way for Mrs. Pendragon to lure her victims into a false sense of security? The question swirled in my head unanswered. But one thing was clear. I couldn't stay in Auburn. With a newfound resolve, I rose, clutching the whistle tightly. The sun was beginning to peek over the horizon, casting an eerie orange glow on the deserted street. Reaching the train station, I used the last of my cash to buy a ticket back to London. The journey seemed to stretch on forever, every creak and groan of the train amplifying my fear. When I finally reached London, the bustling city felt safer than ever. The familiar sights and sounds grounded me, pulling me back from the nightmare I just escaped. I never reported what happened in Auburn. The fear of being labeled a lunatic, coupled with the lack of concrete evidence, the creature itself was proof I wouldn't be believed, kept me silent. But the memory of that night remains vivid, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind a seemingly harmless facade. The whistle hangs on my keychain, a constant reminder of the night the Peony Perch tried to claim another set of strong, healthy teeth. And sometimes in the dead of night, I swear I can hear the faint, desperate scratching from behind a locked door, echoing in the deepest corners of my mind.